let's boot up something special because today we're stepping back into the grid, back to 1982, back to Tron. Now, if you've only ever thought of Tron as that old Disney movie with the glowing suits, buckle up, because there's a lot more going on under the neon. So here's the quick download of the story. Tron follows Kevin Flynn, a brilliant but slightly chaotic computer programmer and video game designer played by Jeff Bridges. Flynn used to work at a company called Encom, but his work was stolen by a colleague, Ed Dillinger, who climbed the corporate ladder using Flynn's code. Flynn is trying to hack into Encom's system to prove it, but the company's powerful artificial intelligence, the Master Control Program, has other plans. Through a piece of experimental tech, because this is the early 80s and we're just going to roll with it, Flynn is digitized and transported inside the computer system itself. And inside that digital world, programs look like people. They're forced to compete in deadly games, gladiator style, for the entertainment and control of the MCP. Flynn teams up with two key allies, Tron, a security program played by Bruce Boxleitner, and Yori, played by Cindy Morgan. Together, they take on the MCP and its second-in-command, a program named Sark, played with chilling authority by David Warner, who also plays Dillinger in the real world. The whole thing builds towards a battle not just for control of the computer system, but for freedom, identity, and maybe even what it means to exist as a program. Now let's talk about the cast, because this is one of those movies where the actors bring way more personality than the glowing suits should realistically allow. Jeff Bridges as Flynn gives us that classic laid-back, slightly rebellious charm he's known for. This is pre-The Big Lebowski, but you can already see hints of that easygoing, anti-establishment vibe that would later define his career. He makes Flynn feel like a guy who's in over his head, but also kind of enjoying the ride. Bruce Boxleitner plays Tron with this earnest, almost knight-like energy. He's basically a digital crusader. Boxleitner would later be well known for Babylon 5, where he again plays a principled, heroic figure, so clearly this was his lane. David Warner is doing double duty here, and he's fantastic. As Dillinger, he's smug and corporate. As Sark, he's cold and calculating and genuinely intimidating. Warner had already built a reputation for playing villains, like in Time After Time and later Titanic. And Tron really lets him lean into that controlled menace. Cindy Morgan as Laura and Yori brings warmth and humanity. Well, as much humanity as you can bring to a glowing digital being. She also starred in Caddyshack, so if you've ever seen her there, it's kind of fun to see her go from comedy to sci-fi mythology. And Bernard Hughes plays Dr. Walter Gibbs, the gentle, old-school programmer who represents a more idealistic view of technology. Hughes had a long and respected career in film and theater, including The Lost Boys. And here he acts as sort of a moral anchor in a rapidly changing digital world. Now, when Tron first hit theaters in 1982, let's just say the reception was unclear. Critics were impressed by the visuals, because honestly, nobody had ever seen anything like that. The use of computer-generated imagery was groundbreaking. But a lot of reviewers felt that the story was thin, or that the characters were overshadowed by the effects. Audiences were curious, but it wasn't a massive blockbuster. It did okay, but not spectacularly. Part of the problem was timing. This was a movie about computers before most people even had one at home. The concepts, programs as people, digital worlds, AI control systems, were just a little too ahead of the curve. It's like the film showed up to the party 10 years early, and everyone else was still figuring out what a floppy disk was. But over time, things did change. Tron has become a full-on cult classic. As technology caught up, audiences started to appreciate what the film was actually doing. The themes of digital identity, corporate control of technology, and the relationship between humans and machines feel way more relevant now than they did back in 1982. Watching it today, it almost feels prophetic. The idea of being inside the system of code shaping reality, of powerful centralized programs controlling everything, it hits differently in a world of the internet, social media algorithms, and AI. What once felt abstract now feels uncomfortably familiar. And that leads into one of the most interesting things about revisiting Tron, how the themes resonate differently now. Back then, the idea of master control program was basically science fiction. Today, we talk about data monopolies, surveillance, and algorithmic influence on a daily basis. The film's question, who controls the system, has gone from theoretical to very real. Even Flynn's struggle as a creator whose work is stolen by a corporation feels modern. That tension between individual creativity and corporate ownership is everywhere now, from tech startups to content creation online. There are also interpretations that audiences may have missed the first time around. On the surface, it's a hero journey inside a computer, but underneath, there's this almost philosophical layer about belief and creation. Programs in the grid actually believe in users as higher beings. Flynn, as a user, is basically godlike to them. But he's also flawed, improvisational, human. So the film kind of plays with this idea of creators and creations and what responsibility comes with that. It's subtle, but it's there. And it becomes a lot more interesting when you revisit the movie through that lens. And let's talk about influence, because Tron quietly shaped a lot of what came after it. Visually, it opened the door for computer-generated imagery in film. Without Tron, you don't get the same path leading to movies like The Matrix, or even modern CGI-heavy blockbusters. It proved that digital worlds could be cinematic, even if the technology was still in its infancy. You can see echoes of Tron in anything that deals with virtual reality, digital consciousness, or stylized cyber worlds. The glowing lines, the sleek black environments, the idea of entering a digital space. It all starts here. And then there are the iconic images, the light cycles, those fast-moving, right-angle turning bikes that leave solid walls of light behind them. Still one of the coolest visual concepts in sci-fi history. The identity discs, the glowing suits, the stark geometric landscapes. Even if you've never seen the movie, you've probably seen something inspired by it. It's one of those films where the aesthetic outlived the initial reception, and eventually pulled the movie itself back into the spotlight. Now here's the real question. How does Tron feel when you watch it today? Honestly, it's kind of charming in the best way. Yes, the effects look dated by modern standards, but they're dated in a way that feels handcrafted, almost artistic. There's a surreal, dreamlike quality to the digital world that modern hyper-realistic CGI sometimes loses. The pacing is a little unusual, the dialogue can be a bit on the nose, and the rules of the world are flexible. But there's an energy to it, a sense that everyone involved was trying something completely new, without a roadmap. And that experimentation is part of what makes it fun. You're not just watching a movie, you're watching a moment in film history where the industry is figuring out what's even possible. So in the end, Tron isn't just a sci-fi film, it's a time capsule. It captures a moment when computers were mysterious, when the digital frontier was just beginning, and when filmmakers were bold enough to imagine what might be on the other side of the screen. It may not have fully landed with audiences in 1982, but it stuck around, evolved in reputation, and eventually found its place as a foundational piece of sci-fi cinema. And honestly, that glow-in-the-dark grid still looks pretty cool. But here's the thing about Tron. It's not just a movie you finish. It's one you kind of keep thinking about after the credits roll. Because what it imagined as this wild, futuristic concept, getting pulled into a digital world, interacting with systems that feel alive, navigating spaces built entirely out of code, that doesn't feel so far-fetched anymore. In some ways, it feels like we've been slowly stepping into that world for years, just without the cool suits. And maybe that's why Tron sticks with people. Not because it got everything perfect, but because it dared to ask questions before we even knew they mattered. What happens when technology stops being just a tool and it starts becoming a place? What does it mean to create something that can act on its own? And where exactly do we fit into all of that once the lines start to blur? Watching it now, there's this weird mix of nostalgia and realization. Nostalgia for a time when computers felt like magic, and realization that the magic never really went away. It just got more complicated. So yeah, the effects might be dated, the pacing might be a little off, but the ideas are still very much alive. So what's your favorite scene in the movie? Light cycles or something else? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to join me for more trips back to the video stores of old.